Krishna consciousness following all the three regulative principles. Should be four. Right? Okay, good. So do we know where we left off? First, chapter 1.
We're done. Chapter 1, verse 10 was done, I think.
Verse 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably we'll start with 11.
Okay, you read. Chapter 1, verse 11. Good. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutani Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tanamini Namaste Saraswati Deve Guruvani Pracharini Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskati Visatarani Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivastava Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Go.
Ayanisu cha sarveshu yatha bhagam avasthitah bhismam eva bhirakshantu bhavantaha sarva eva hi. All of you must now give full support to Grandfather Bhishma as you stand at your respective strategic points of entrance into the phalanx of the army. Duryodhana, after praising the prowess of Bhishma, further considered that others might think that they had been considered less important. So, in his usual diplomatic way, he tried to adjust the situation in the above words. He emphasized that Bhishma Deva was undoubtedly the greatest hero, but he was an old man, so everyone must especially think of his protection from all sides. He might become engaged in the fight, and the enemy might take advantage of his full engagement on one side. Therefore, it was important for other heroes not leave their strategic position and allow the enemy to break the phalanx. Duryodhana clearly felt that the victory of Kurus depend on the presence of Bhishma Deva. He was confident of the full support of Bhishma Deva and Dronacharya in the battle because he well knew that they did not even speak a word when Arjun's wife Draupadi, in her helpless condition, had appealed to them for justice while she was being forced to appear naked in the presence of all the great generals in the assembly. Although he knew that the two generals had some sort of affection for the Pandavas, he hoped that these generals would now completely give it up as they had done during the gambling performances.
Any questions? You see, the problem is that we can ask the question, maybe we can discuss it. Why is it that Dronacharya and Bhisma Deva did not object when Draupadi was being stripped in front of the assembly?
Because their allegiance was to the throne.
Their allegiance was?
To the throne, whoever the king.
Yeah, in a sense, that is the answer, but you have to be a little more specific. So both of them had been compromised by the, let's say, strategy of Dronacharya, of Dhritarashtra. Duryodhana. Okay, in the case of Dronacharya, Duryodhana had helped him. And Bhisma Deva, he was connected to Kurus by a vow that he had made to his father and his mother, so he could not go against that vow, that he would always protect them. So both of them their hands were tied. They both knew that what was happening was extremely inauspicious, and it would portend doom for the Kurus. But they were bound by loyalties not to do anything. So it's like a real life situation.
Probably that's very strange though, right? How can somebody tolerate like that?
Yeah, that's a good question to ask. This is also explained if you look in page 11th chapter, verse 49. In the purport, Prabhupada says, in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna was worried about killing Bhisma and Drona, his worshipful grandfather and master. But Krishna said that he need not be afraid of killing his grandfather. When the sons of Dhritarashtra tried to disrobe Draupadi in the assembly of the Kurus, Bhisma and Drona were silent, and for such negligence of duty, they should be killed. Krishna showed his universal form to Arjuna just to show him that these people were already killed for their unlawful action. That scene was shown to Arjuna because devotees are always peaceful and they cannot perform such horrible actions. The purpose of the revelation of the universal form was shown. Now Arjuna wanted to see the four-armed form, and Krishna showed him. Okay, so you see, there are different levels of loyalty or allegiance. And this is something that a person has to think clearly in their mind. Should they stand up for this truth? Or are they willing to compromise their allegiance to the truth because of family or other considerations? Okay. So this is a problem that everyone faces in life. It's not only Bhisma or Drona. So, in the case of Bhisma and Drona, you see, they had to pay the price of being killed because they were negligent in their duty. What is their duty? Is to uphold the principles of Dharma. Just like Krishna is virtually forcing Arjuna to uphold the principles of Dharma, even though Arjuna is against it. He doesn't want to do it. And he finds many moral, ethical reasons why he should not fight in the battle of Kurukshetra. But Krishna doesn't accept any of them, even though they sound very noble. So you see, family attachment, ethnic attachment, racial attachment, all these things can be serious obstacles to following the principles of Dharma and truth. And this explained also okay. Yeah, it looks like a second chapter, verse 11. Yeah. So, in the last paragraph, so anyway, in this verse, Krishna tells Arjuna, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, the Lord at once took the position of the teacher and chastised the student, calling him indirectly a fool. The Lord said, you are talking like a learned man, but you do not know that one who is learned, one who knows what is body and what is soul, does not lament for any stage of the body, neither in the living nor in the dead condition. As explained in later chapters, it will be clear that knowledge means to know matter and spirit and the controller of both. Arjuna argued that religious principles should be given more importance than politics or sociology. But he did not know that knowledge of matter, soul, and the supreme is even more important than religious formularies. This is the point. And because he was lacking in that knowledge, he should not have posed himself as a very learned man. As he did not happen to be a very learned man, he was consequently lamenting for something which was unworthy of lamentation. The body is born and is destined to be vanquished today or tomorrow. Therefore, the body is not as important as the soul. One who knows this is actually learned, and for him there's no cause for lamentation, regardless of the conditions of the material body. So there's lamentation. There are two symptoms of a person being overwhelmed with ignorance and in the throes of illusion. And they are hankering and lamentation. Brahma bhuta prasanatma nasochati nakangsati samaksarvesu bhutesu madbhaktim lapate param. So, this verse 1855 says that Brahma bhuta prasanatma, one who knows the Supreme Absolute Truth, prasanatma, they are satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Therefore, nasuchati nakangsati, they have no more lamentation, suchati, and no more kangsati, material desires. That doesn't mean they have no desires. It means they have no material desires. Their material desires have been replaced by genuine spiritual desires. So what is the difference between a material desire and a spiritual desire? A material desire is for pleasing one's own senses. And a spiritual desire is for pleasing the senses of Krishna by using our body and senses, mind, intelligence, everything to please Krishna. So that's the main difference between material and spiritual consciousness. The material concept of life is, how can I please this body, this temporary body? The spiritual conception of life is, how can I use this temporary body to please Krishna? And we see that the gopis in Vrindavan, in the spiritual world, they use everything at their command, body, mind, intelligence, soul, everything. Of course, in the spiritual world, there's no difference between the body and the soul, but they use everything to serve the comfort of Krishna, serve the pleasure of Krishna, without any personal selfish desire. So, the main thing that holds people back from such, let's say, unselfish abandon to the will of God is attachments. It can be attachments to money, it can be attachment to family, it can be attachment to any kind of personal desire. And when those desires are frustrated, they lament. So these are the two conditions of someone who is in illusion, sochati and kangsati. Lamenting for something they've lost, desiring something that they don't have. And you'll never have, it's impossible to have everything you want. So, in a situation like that, people are destined to suffer because they'll always be hankering for something that they can't get. In other words, once they get something they want, they're a little bit satisfied. Then again, they want something more. And that is an unending cycle of suffering. So then, again, concerning Arjuna, so if we look on chapter number 13, verse 22. And the last part of the last paragraph, it says, the best example is here. Oh no, it says, one has to rise above, therefore, above the three material modes, and become situated in the transcendental position. That is called Krishna consciousness. Unless one is situated in Krishna consciousness, his material consciousness will oblige him to transfer from one body to another, because he has material desires since time immemorial. But he has to change that conception. In other words, instead of material desires, we should have spiritual desires. What are spiritual desires? Well, uniquely to please Krishna, and that by following the instructions of bona fide spiritual gurus, Siksha and Diksha gurus. Unless one is situated in Krishna consciousness, his or her material consciousness will oblige him to transfer from one body to another, because he has material desires since time immemorial. But he has to change that conception. That change can be effected only by hearing from authoritative sources. The best example is here. Arjuna is hearing the science of God from Krishna, the living entity. If he submits to this hearing process, will lose his long-cherished desire to dominate material nature, and gradually and proportionately, as he reduces his long desire to dominate, he comes to enjoy spiritual happiness. In a Vedic mantra it is said that as he becomes learned in association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he proportionately relishes his eternal blissful life. So in other words, everyone's striving for happiness, but they're looking for happiness in the wrong place. So if you look in the wrong place, you'll never find it. You'll find maybe imitation happiness. And this is one symptom of people who are materialistically inclined. They never want the real thing. They're always attracted by the false thing. Just like once there was a man who set up a tent on the street in Delhi, and he put up a sign, imitation dog, pachas paisa. So there was a big line of people, and each guy would go in alone, and the man would be inside, and he would imitate a dog barking, and the person would come out holding his gut, laughing like anything, right? So another man saw that. This is India, right? So he said, well, this is nonsense, he said. So he set up a tent right next to that other guy, and he put up, real dog, pachas paisa, right? And nobody went. They all wanted to see the imitation dog. So this is exactly what's happening. People want the imitation happiness that is never satisfying, but the real happiness, they're not interested. Right? So how do you get the real happiness? It's by a gradual process of replacing material desires with genuine spiritual desires. And proportionately, as they're replaced, one begins to feel transcendental happiness. Transcendental happiness is something that's sustainable. Material happiness is not sustainable. We get old, we get sick, people die, there's economic upturn, there's economic downturn, there's peace, there's war, there are family problems, there are neighbor problems, all the time something is interrupting the person's feeling of happiness, and there's anxiety, and there's fear, and ultimately one is left with just memories of happiness and a lot of tangible suffering. So that's not a sustainable situation. So this change from the material conception of life, in which one is overwhelmed with material desires, can be affected by hearing the science of God from Krishna. So we're hearing the science of God from Krishna when you read the Bhagavad Gita as it is. If you read the Bhagavad Gita as somebody else wants it to be, then you're not hearing Krishna. because they've given their own interpretation. But when you hear it as it is, you have progressive understanding. It becomes more and more clear. Why are we here in the material world, subject to birth, death, old age, and disease, when our soul is eternal? Because of unending number of material desires. And they just get more and more. As you would think they would diminish as you get older. No. They increase as you get older. They don't end. They just get worse and worse. And therefore there's a nice verse in the second chapter, at the end of the second chapter. It says, Puriyamanam achalam patistam, second chapter, 70th verse. Samudram apakpavisanti tadvat kamayam pavisanti sarve sasantim apnati nakama kami. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. So this is one of those verses of universal wisdom. If you want universal wisdom, it's non-sectarian also. This is one of those verses, second chapter, 70th verse. And Prabhupada explains in the purport of the commentary, although the vast ocean is always filled with water, it is always, especially during the rainy season, being filled with much more water. Well, we're coming into the rainy season now. Next week it's going to rain every day. But the ocean remains the same, steady. It is not agitated. Nor does it cross beyond the limit of its brink. That is also true of a person fixed in Krishna consciousness. As long as one has the material body, the demands of the body for sense gratification will continue. The devotee, however, is not disturbed by such desires because of his fullness. In other words, it's saying here, these desires never stop. Desire is a symptom of the soul, in the body. Does a dead body have any desires? No. So the fact that you're alive means you have desires, right? Now the question is the quality of the desires and the goal of the desires. That's the question. So the devotee is not disturbed by all these material desires, knowing well that they will only lead to temporary benefit, not long-term benefit. Just like when a person goes to school, they engage in a type of tapasya, right? Unless they're like a party animal. But if they're not a party animal, they're studious, they're serious about, going to the classes, taking notes, listening carefully, asking questions, doing homework, and passing tests, right? That means they are sacrificing. Sacrificing what? Going to this party, going to that sports event, going here, going there, right? And they're putting in the time, especially when you go to college. When I went to college, I studied minimum 12 hours a day. I had to. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to pass the courses. We were getting huge amount of homework and very challenging things that we had to write all the time, papers. It required a tremendous amount of research, and we didn't have internet then, so we'd have to go to the library. So I was spending like up to 12 hours a day in the library. The library was open 24 hours a day. There were people that were in the library 24 hours sometimes, when they're writing their papers and so on. Because we didn't have the internet. You could only rely on what you could find in the library. Well, that is tapasya, that's austerity, right? For a higher purpose. One cannot attain anything without performing austerity, right? Now, there's austerity in the mode of ignorance, austerity in the mode of passion, austerity in the mode of goodness. So, in the mode of goodness, people perform tapasya or austerity for spiritual enlightenment. And in the mode of ignorance, they perform austerity for, the austerity is they take drugs, they don't bathe, they don't eat properly, they don't sleep properly, and so forth. That's the type of austerity. If you ever see a drunk person, they're sleeping in the street in freezing cold, right? But they're so intoxicated that they don't consciously feel it. Their body feels it, but they don't consciously feel it because they're numbed by the intoxication. But it's there, and it takes a toll on them. Someone who lives like that, they don't last very long. So here it says, let's see what it says that in 18th chapter. It says austerity. Interesting. Austerity and the mode of passion. Let me just see where that is. Okay, yeah. Yeah, there's austerity of the body, the mind, and speech. 17th chapter. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so it says that austerity of the body consists in worship of the Supreme Lord. Verse 14, 17, 14. Austerity of the body consists in worship of the Supreme Lord, worship of the Brahmanas, the spiritual master, and superiors like the father and mother, and in cleanliness, simplicity, celibacy, and nonviolence. Austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. Austerity of the mind is satisfaction, simplicity, gravity, self-control, and purification of one's existence are the austerities of the mind. This threefold austerity, performed with transcendental faith by men, not expecting material benefits, but engaged only for the sake of the Supreme, is called austerity and goodness. So now, other people perform austerity in passion and austerity in ignorance. So ignorance is, let's say a person makes a vow, I'm not going to eat anything unless Trump is impeached and is no longer president. Some people make vows like that, right? So this happened during the time when the Irish Republican Army was fighting the British. Some of their leaders were caught, they were put in jail, and they made a vow to fast to death unless they were let out of prison. Right? So the British, being what they are, they're extremely nasty. About 4 of them died, fasting to death, right? And then the rest of them stopped because, they realized the British are worse than them. So they just let them starve to death, right? Of course, that frees up the legal system a little bit. They don't have to go have any trials anymore. But, that's austerity in a mode of ignorance, when you destroy yourself. Right? And then austerity in a mode of passion is, there are many examples of that. People will do crazy things in order to increase their sense gratification. So, all right, so now, coming back to the actual subject, Arjuna, in many places in Bhagavad Gita, explains why Krishna did not let him give up his duty. Now, this is a fundamental question in life. What is my real duty in life? What should I really be doing? I'm doing so many things, but what should I really be doing? So, if we look in the 3rd chapter, okay, it's the 2nd chapter, 71st verse. Yeah, Vihaya kamam yasarvam pumam charitanis brahman nirmamam nirahankara sasanti madiganshati. It's a very important verse. A person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship and is devoid of false ego, he alone can obtain real peace. Now, this does not mean you have no desires. It means you have no material desires. Now, this is a major difference between, I've explained this before, the impersonalist school of philosophy in India called Mayavada, and the personal school of philosophy in India called Krishna consciousness or bhakti. The difference is, the Mayavadis, the impersonalists, they say, give up all desires. And the devotees say, give up all material desires and replace them with genuine spiritual desires. Look, because we said you can't really live, you're not really living if you have no desires, right? I mean, a dead body has no desire. A dead brain has no desires. But if you're a living person. So what is the Mayavad philosophy all about? It's all about neti, nirakar, nirguna, giving up everything, right? So if you give up everything, you're no longer a person. Right? So that's an unsustainable situation again. Right? You hamstring yourself into being a non-person. No, the idea is to give up material desires and replace them with spiritual desires. Then you enter into the spiritual world, that which is unlimited. So, to become desireless, now this explains, the purport by Prabhupada explains very clearly, to become desireless means not to desire anything for sense gratification. That is real desirelessness. In other words, desire for becoming Krishna conscious is actually desirelessness, because you have no material desire then. You simply desire to please Krishna. To understand one's actual position as the eternal servitor of Krishna, without falsely claiming this material body to be oneself, and without falsely claiming proprietorship over anything in the world, is the perfect stage of Krishna consciousness. So now, we're getting close now to understanding what is my real duty in life. And this is a fundamental question. It's the 5th aspect of truth. There are 5 aspects, right? Who is God? Who am I? What is this? What is time? What is the material world? And what is my duty in life? These are 5 fundamental questions that are answered in Bhagavad Gita. So this is beginning to answer that 5th question. What is my real duty in life? Well, you can't know what your real duty in life unless you know who you are, right? If you say, oh, I'm a punk rocker, well, then you'll never figure out what your real duty in life is. Then, you know, that identification of self as a punk rocker would completely divest you of any possibility of understanding who you are, really, right? It's complete false identification. So, it says here, one who is situated in this perfect stage knows that because Krishna is the proprietor of everything, everything must be used for the satisfaction of Krishna. Now here is a principle of proprietorship. Now societies are organized based on principles of proprietorship. Now we live in a so-called capitalist society in America. That means most of the laws in this country protect individual proprietorship. Now in a communist society, the laws are written in such a way that there's communal proprietorship of everything, including children. In pure communist societies, even the children don't belong to you. They belong to everybody, right? And your toaster doesn't belong to you. It belongs to everybody, you know. Your fingernails don't belong to you. They belong to everybody. That's how ridiculous it is, right? So, you know, if you think something belongs to you, immediately everyone gets on your case. So there are societies like that. There's this one German philosopher, Reich, R-E-I-C-H. He started societies like that, communes like that. To enter the commune, you had to give up everything, including your kids. You can enter, you bring your kids, yeah, but they're no longer your kids. You have to give up all your money. You have to give up everything. But then you get certain benefits. You can have as much sense gratification as you want with anybody. Right? So there were benefits. Of course, that's not a benefit. That's actually a curse. But there were benefits in the minds of some demented people. So, okay, that's communism. Then socialism, the state is the proprietor. So all the laws protect state proprietorship. So when you look at a place like Venezuela, it used to be a capitalist country, or a dictatorship, let's say. But then when Chavez took over militarily, he wanted to create a communist country. So what did they do? One by one, they took over different industries and banks. They took over the banks, the industries, especially the oil industry. Venezuela is a very, very rich country. They have tons of oil. Right? Today, people are starving. Nothing works anymore. Even the exportation of oil doesn't work anymore. And they still export, but it doesn't come. And by the way, the price of oil went down. So it's a catastrophe because everything in their economy was based on oil. So the country is on the verge of total bankruptcy. In any week now, they're going to go completely bankrupt. That is, the ridiculous, nature of socialism, and I mean fanatical socialism. Because the government is the worst manager in the whole world. Anything managed by the government will fall apart. Because nobody's responsible. Right? No one feels responsible. And if there's corruption from the top down, then everything falls apart. That's what happened to the Soviet Union. That's why the Soviet Union fell apart. Because the corruption, it took 80 years, but the corruption started from the top and it filtered down to the point where nobody was working seriously because they were all guaranteed a minimum wage, right? So nobody really cared, whether they worked hard. In fact, if you worked hard, you were penalized. Right? So nobody worked hard, but everyone worked on the side, for their own benefit, and everyone stole things. The manager of the factory stole things, right down to the mechanic in the factory, or the guy that cleaned the toilet. Everyone was stealing. So obviously the whole system collapsed. Right? But it took 80 years, and the death of about 45 million people. 45 million people had to die. And there's more people die due to the communist government than that died in World War II. Right? Okay. So here it says, Arjuna did not want to fight for his own sense gratification. Wow, that's a big statement. If you hear, and we're going to read all the noble things Arjuna says in the first chapter, why he doesn't want to fight. But the real reason behind it was his sense gratification, his feel-goodness. Right? It had nothing to do with Dharma. But when he became fully Krishna conscious, he fought because Krishna wanted him to fight. So that is a real duty in life. A real duty is, what does Krishna want me to do? Everyone say, well, what does my grandfather want me to do? What does my boss want me to do? What does this one want me to do? That one want me to do? Right? But our real duty is, what does Krishna want me to do? Because none of these people are going to save me from death, right? You can be on your deathbed, your grandfather comes and gives you a blessing. You're still going to die, right? He's not going to be able to save you. Your boss is not going to save you. Your coworkers are not going to save you. Nobody's going to be able to save you. The doctor can't save you, right? But Krishna can save you. So therefore, our real duty is to Krishna, not to all these other people. Yeah, we have two types of duties. One is worldly duties, right? Like you have a duty to follow the laws of the country in which you live. If you don't, you get punished. So you have an incentive to follow them. You have certain moral, ethical duties. Like, for example, let's say you're in a family situation, and everybody in the family eats meat except you. But your duty is to cook for everybody else. So Prabhupada's sister was in that situation. Her husband was a fish eater. He was a real Bengali. All Bengalis eat fish. They can't stop eating fish. It doesn't matter what religion they are, they eat fish. That's their religion, they eat fish. So, but Prabhupada's sister, although she's Bengali, she was a pure Vaishnava, so she didn't eat fish. But in order to keep her marriage going, her husband happy, she had to cook fish for him. Right? And Prabhupada once said, just see what a good person she is. In order to keep her husband happy, she cooked fish, although for her it's totally repugnant, right? But she did it just to keep the family together. But she never ate fish, right? So, in this way, sometimes you have these situations where you have to do things that you know are wrong, but you don't do it. But in order to because of certain situations in life, you're forced to do it. You know. However, I know a lady from Fiji. She's a very good devotee. Her husband's a real Fijian man. You know, he eats meat, he smokes, he drinks, does everything wrong. Right? So she worked out a deal with him that he could do any of those things in the garage, not in the house, where she's worshiping.
Am I right, Prabhu?
Huh?
She lives in Portland, am I right?
Yeah. He can do whatever he wants in the garage, but he can't do it in the house because she's worshiping the deities in the house. And because the guy had a little bit of respect for the deities that she was worshiping, he agreed. So whenever he wants to eat meat, he goes in the garage and does his little barbecue or whatever he's doing. Whenever he wants to drink some wine or something, he goes into the garage. So she worked that understanding with her husband, and therefore they lived together. All these years. They've been married maybe 50 years. Right? So, if a person is true to their, let's say, convictions, but not like a crazy fanatic, they can work some situation out. Now, if there's no way of working any situation out, then there is, the Vedic system is, mutual separation, not divorce. Divorce is not permitted, but there can be mutual separation if they can't work out a working situation. So here it says, for himself there was no desire to fight, but for Krishna the same Arjuna fought to his best ability. Real desirelessness is desire for the satisfaction of Krishna, not an artificial attempt to abolish desires. So here, this is the Mayavadi situation. Abolish all desires, then you'll achieve Brahman. That's a bunch of nonsense. But many people believe it. Can they abolish all the desires? No, it's impossible. Maybe for a short period of time, but they cannot sustain it. The living entity cannot be desireless or senseless, but he does have to change the quality of the desires. Now this makes sense. You can't stop the desires, but you can change the quality of this is something that's possible to do. And how do you do it? You continually hear Bhagavad Gita and discuss it and think about it deeply. And that will affect the change, the complete about face. A materially desireless person certainly knows that everything belongs to Krishna. Ishavaisham idam sarvam. That's the first mantra of the Ishopanishad. And therefore, he does not falsely claim proprietorship over anything. So you see, twice now he's mentioning the concept of proprietorship. The concept of proprietorship is the basis of societal organization. So I didn't finish. I talked about capitalism, I talked about communism, I talked about socialism, right? Now there's monarchy. In the monarchy, the laws protect the king and the nobles, their proprietorship. And in a strict monarchy, other people don't own anything. It all belongs to the king and the nobles. Right? And in a dictatorship, everything belongs to the dictator, his family, and his cronies, such as industrialists and other big-time people, and he protects them. But everything belongs to him and his family, right? Or his friends. And in a anarchist society, nothing belongs to anybody. Everything goes in such a society. And there are societies like that, right? It's different than communist society, because there's no real communist society. The Soviet Union was not a real communist society. According to Lenin and Marx, there would be a transition period from whatever system of proprietorship there was before to a pure communist state. They never made that transition in the Soviet Union. That's another reason why it failed. Because if you know the history of the Soviet Union, they built up, they were supposed to have a classless society, but a new classes arose. You had the politicians, right, and the Kshatriyas. You had the intellectuals. You had the businessmen. The businessmen, they didn't own the factories, but they managed the factories. So it was like owning them anyway, right? So, and then you had the workers, who were supposed to be the owners of everything, but the other guys took over. So it never became a real classless society. But anarchism is this classless society. Nobody owns anything. And it's just chaos. Okay, so here, the real concept of proprietorship is that Krishna owns everything. I don't own anything. Krishna owns it. But he gives me an opportunity to manage things correctly on his behalf. So that's the right concept of proprietorship. And in such a society, people become happy. In the other societies, anarchism, communism, socialism, capitalism, monarchy, dictatorship, nobody is happy. Or if somebody's happy, it only lasts for a little while. So, a materially desireless person knows that everything belongs to Krishna, and therefore he does not falsely claim proprietorship over anything. This transcendental knowledge is based on self-realization, namely, knowing perfectly well that every living entity is an eternal part and parcel of Krishna in spiritual identity, and that the eternal position of the living entity is therefore never on the level of Krishna or greater than him. This understanding of Krishna consciousness is the basic principle of real peace. In other words, we can never become Krishna. We can never become equal to Krishna. We're always subordinate to Krishna. So this is the whole simple message of the Bhagavad Gita. As long as we're subordinate to Krishna, and everything we do depends on Krishna's mercy, then we learn to live peacefully. And Krishna guarantees to supply our minimum needs. In fact, he's supplying the minimum needs for everybody. The animals, the insects, the birds, the fish, human beings, the demigods. He's supplying everybody, right? Like, for example, if you purchased an elephant and tried to keep him in your backyard, you'd probably go bankrupt. You know, an elephant eats 200 pounds or 200 to 400 pounds a day. How would you, like if you buy let's say you buy 400 pounds of hay to feed the elephant, that would be approximately $88 a day you'd be spending. So $888, 10 days times 3, over $2,400. Plus, you have to get rid of all the stool, right? So if he's eating so much every day, he's also passing stool and urine, right? So, it would cost you like $5,000 to keep the elephant in your backyard every month, right? And then elephants have babies, right? So now you have 2 of them. So you have to buy another backyard, another house. So you see, you would go bankrupt keeping an elephant. But yet, there are thousands of elephants in India and Africa and Southeast Asia. Thousands of them. Who's taking care of them? Many of them are wild, right? Obviously, Krishna is taking care of them. They're all eating every day. You don't see any elephant, starving to death, right? So Krishna is taking care of the elephants, taking care of the ants, taking care of the butterflies, taking care of the birds, the fish. You know how many fish there are in the world? It runs into billions and billions, many, many billions, maybe trillions. Right? Who's feeding them? Krishna's feeding them. And so he'll feed us also. So here we have a very nice purport. And then just one more thing, and then we'll go back. That is, okay, if you look on the introduction, we already read this, but we'll look at it again. It's your page 14, my page 16. There are many examples given of how we are to utilize those things which are set aside for us by the Lord. In other words, the Lord sets aside for every living being the minimum needs. This is also explained in Bhagavad Gita. In the beginning, Arjuna decided that he should not fight in the battle of Kurukshetra. This was his own decision. Arjuna told the Lord that it was not possible for him to enjoy the kingdom after killing his own kinsman. This decision was based on the body, because he was thinking that the body was himself, and that his bodily relations or expansions were his brothers, nephews, brothers-in-law, grandfathers, and so on. Therefore, he wanted to satisfy his bodily demands. Bhagavad Gita was spoken by the Lord just to change this view. And at the end, Arjuna decides to fight under the directions of the Lord when he says, Karishya vachanam tava, I shall act according to your word. So that's the whole purpose of hearing Bhagavad Gita. So some people say, oh, don't hear Bhagavad Gita, you won't be a normal person anymore, right? You won't eat birthday cake with eggs. You won't eat a nice steak. You won't, go to the casino and have fun. In fact, you'll be a party pooper. You see, this is the social pressure on people, and it's powerful. Your family was, sometimes people call India, and family say, "How you doing?" So, "Oh, I'm doing great." What's happening? Say, "Well, I'm going to the temple." What? Which temple is it? Is it a Hindu temple? No, I'm going to Krishna temple. Don't do that. Don't go to the Krishna temple. Why did they say that? Because they think, oh, if you go to the Krishna temple, then we can't, do what we normally do, right? Like, I was once asked to be a priest at this wedding, and the father and mother of the bride, they're devotees. They're devotees, right? Initiated. Well, during the wedding, it was a Fijian wedding. At one point, everyone said, "Toast, toast, toast." You know what a toast is? This is not the bread that you put in the. They want to toast the bride and groom, right? So all of a sudden, these bottles of wine appeared, and they started pouring them. And the father and mother of the bride, they also poured, and they looked at me, and I just looked at them, So the father lifts up the glass with the wine in it, and everybody else lifts it up, and they start clicking the glasses like this, and they all drank, toast to the bridegroom, I mean, that's social pressure, right? It was so strong that even the father and mother, who had devotees initiated, they also did it. In fact, they were sort of leading it. So, and the bottles of wine, they appeared, all of a sudden they appeared, they weren't there before, they must have had it under the table or something, all of a sudden we're there, they started pouring them. So, this is the problem, this family custom, habit, social pressure, it weighs on people. Just like, why is it that many kids of Hindu families, in which traditionally they don't eat meat, but because the kid goes to school and feels weirded out by being the only kid that doesn't eat meat with all the Americans, he insists on eating meat, and the family lets him do it. The family lets him do it. Right? Why is that? It's social pressure. Social pressure is a very powerful thing. Right? Unless you're trained properly in Krishna consciousness. And by the way, this is something you have to realize. In America, Americans actually respect people who have values and follow their values. But they'll do everything possible to make you break those values. But if you're unbreakable, they actually respect you. And they lose respect for you when you break your principles. Now, of course, they have to be principles that make sense, right? I mean, if your principle is you're going to kill infidels, that's nonsense, right? But if your principle is, I will never eat meat, right? I'd rather starve than eat meat because I can't offer it to Krishna. People will respect that. They'll think you're crazy, but they'll respect it because you have principles. They don't respect people that don't have principles. They don't have principles, so misery likes company. They want you to break your principles. But if you stick to them, they respect you. They might think you're crazy, but they respect you because you stick to something that's real, that makes sense. Not, I'm going to kill every infidel. That's nonsense. But you respect them. You don't say, I'm not telling you you have to stop eating meat if you don't want to. That's your business, but I'm not going to touch it. Okay, so now we'll go back to the verse today. So, what is the next verse? 14?
No, 12.
11.
11 is done. Oh.
10. 11, 12.
Chapter 1,
You wanna read?
11,
Chapter
12.
1, verse number 12.
Then Bhishma, the great, valiant grandsire of the Kuru dynasty, the grandfather of the fighters, blew his conch shell very loudly, making a sound like the roar of a lion, giving Duryodhana joy. Purport. The grandsire of the Kuru dynasty could understand inner meaning of the heart of his grandson Duryodhana, and out of his natural compassion for him, he tried to cheer him by blowing his conch shell very loudly. Befitting his position as a lion, indirectly by the symbolism of the conch shell, he informed his depressed grandson Duryodhana that he had no chance of victory in the battle because the Supreme Lord Krishna was on the other side, but still it was his duty to conduct the fight, and no pains would be spared in that connection.
So, this is a thing that's very hard for people to understand. This loyalty to duty is an extremely important thing, except in the condition where that loyalty to duty will violate the principles of Dharma. But in general, it's a very important thing, very important principle. And This is explained by Krishna also, especially in the 8th chapter. But let's talk about this duty. Like, for example, let's say someone is married and they have children, but they're not happy. What is their duty? If you go to a psychiatrist or a social, or let's say a family counselor, in private the counselors say, well, you should get a divorce, because you're not happy. That they'll almost invariably they'll say. At first they pretend to say, well, maybe you can work this out like this or like that. But if they see that it's very difficult to work things out, they'll say, get a divorce. But see, that's not at all following the principles of Dharma. So if we read this verse, let's see, which one is it? Krishna tells Arjuna, 8th chapter, 7th verse. Tasmat sarve sakale sumam anusmarat yudhyacha mayarpitamano vidyamam vaisya samsaya. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. Now, the question is, what is the person's goal in life? If they say, well, my goal in life is to be happy in my family. Well, that's not the real goal of life. Of course, every politician that gets caught cheating, they always say, well, what's most important for me is my family. Of course, they didn't think of that when they were cheating. It's only when they get caught cheating that they say that. Right? So that's a bunch of nonsense. Right? If he was really concerned about his family, he wouldn't do anything that would be dishonorable. Right? Because it would cause pain to the family. Right? But they always say, well, the most important thing to me is my family. There's a bunch of nonsense. Right? But anyway, here, you can carry out your duty if you're always thinking of Krishna. So then, you could just ignore the hogwash of the family counselor, that's saying, oh, you should get a divorce. No, there's no question of divorce. It's a question of doing your duty based on the principles of Dharma. That's what's the important thing. Now, in the case of Bhisma and Dronacharya, you have an example of two people who were duty-bound, right? They're actually good people. But when you're duty-bound to a bad person, whatever happens to that bad person is going to happen to you. If you're duty-bound to a good person, then whatever is going to happen to a good person will happen to you. Right? When I mean good person, I mean one who is a dharmi, who's following the principles of Dharma. Right? So the leader should always be a person who's following the principles of Dharma strictly. Right? Then being loyal to such a person, So then the question is, okay, someone says, well, I'm married to someone who's not a real devotee, so am I duty bound to this person? Well, you're duty bound to the children. You're duty bound to the children. You have to do your duty to protect the children. That's what you would call your ethical, moral, lower swadharma. There's higher swadharma and lower swadharma means your duty in life. So a lower swadharma would be, at least until the children are grown and married, my duty is to protect them, regardless if I'm happy or not happy. So here it says, this instruction to Arjuna is very important for all men engaged in material activities. The Lord does not say that one should give up his prescribed duties or engagements. One can continue them and, at the same time, think of Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna. This will free one from material contamination and engage the mind and intelligence in Krishna. By chanting Krishna's names, one will be transferred to the Supreme Planet Krishna Loka without a doubt. So, yeah, sometimes you're stuck in a situation, just like Prabhupada's sister was stuck in a situation. And, but she always maintained her total loyalty and allegiance to Krishna and her guru. She was initiated devotee, right? But still, to keep the family together, she cooked fish for her husband, right? She didn't eat the fish. And the same way, if one's mind is fixed on Krishna, they can tolerate any situation until their temporal or temporary duty is over. Right. And then also, let's see, some other thing I want to show you. This question of duty is extremely important because it defines who a person is. So, let's look at 3rd chapter, verse 29. Pakrite gunasam buddha sajante gunakarmasu tan akrishna vido mada Krishna vin na vichalaya. Bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached. But the wise should not unsettle them, although these duties are inferior, due to the performer's lack of knowledge. Now this is a surprising verse. Someone would say, no, you have to, convince them that what they're doing is wrong. Right.
Which verse?
3rd chapter, 29th verse. So let's read the purport. Okay.
Persons who are unknowledgeable falsely identify with the gross material consciousness and are full of material designations. This body is gift of the material nature, and one who is too much attached to the bodily consciousness is called manda, or lazy person without understanding of spiritual soul. Ignorant men think of the body as the self. They accept bodily connections with others as kinsmanship. The land in which the body is obtained is the object of worship.
Vande Mataram. Go ahead. That's
And
not
they
just
consider-
India, it's every country is like that.
And they
What is for
consider
America, Prabhupada?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, right? It's just like, RSS, they pledge allegiance to the flag of India. So in America, they pledge allegiance to the flag of America, right? Everybody has a flag nowadays, So,
and they consider the formalities of religious rituals to the ends in themselves.
okay, we'll discuss what that means. Go ahead, finish.
Social work, nationalism, and
Altruism.
altruism are some of the activities of such
For
such materially designated persons. Under the spell of such designations, they are always busy in the material field. For them, spiritual realization is a myth, and so they are not interested. Those who are enlightened in the spiritual life, however, should not try to agitate such materially engrossed persons. Better to prosecute one's own spiritual activities silently. Such a bewildered persons may be engaged in such primary moral principles of life as non-violence and similar materially benevolent work. Men who are ignorant cannot appreciate activities in Krishna consciousness, and therefore Lord Krishna advises us not to disturb them and simply waste valuable time. But the devotees of the Lord are more kind than the Lord
Wow.
himself, because they understand the purpose of the Lord. Consequently, they undertake all kinds of risk, even to the point of approaching ignorant men to try to engage them in the acts of Krishna consciousness, which is absolutely necessary for the human being.
So here we see that it's very risky to be an active preacher of Krishna consciousness, because you're going to be constantly coming up against people or meeting people who are so deeply entrenched in ignorance that they become angry even if you say one word about God. They become angry and vicious. Right? But the devotees take that risk. So to become an active preacher, you have to be very, let's say, worldly wise. And it's important to be able to understand the degree of illusion in which people are very quickly. Otherwise, you might trip the wire of an IED, improvised explosive device. That's an IED. You know, the IEDs have killed so many American soldiers in Iraq and Syria. You know, or yet they make these booby trap bombs, right? They're homemade usually, and you just step on it or you just touch the wire, immediately it blows up. You lose your leg or you die, right? And you're injured the rest of your life. So,
Linemen's,
huh?
they call linemen.
Linemen, yeah, but these are improvised explosive devices. Landmines are manufactured by Russia or America. You know, America claims they don't manufacture them, but you know they're being manufactured. They're being outsourced to China. So, but these are improvised. The other ones are professionally made. These are improvised, so they're even more dangerous. Right?
Smaller in size.
It's much smaller. You can't even see them. You know, you step on them, it blows up, right? So, yeah, there are many people walking around who are improvised explosive devices. You just say one thing about God, they immediately explode. One time I went to this one political meeting, and I had made some pamphlets, you know, and the first person I gave it to told me, if you give one more out, I'll take my knife out and stab you to death. He told me right to my face. He told me that.
Where, Prabhuji?
What?
Where?
This was in Switzerland. He told me, I'll kill you right here in front of everybody. Right? I mean, there are people like that in this world. Okay, he saw the word, something mentioned about God. That immediately it is improvised explosiveness just came out right away, you know. So, therefore it says, you know, Krishna says, don't disturb the minds of people like this, you know. Just, basically he's saying, ignore them. But devotees are so kind that they'll take the risk to preach to such people, right? And it's always a risk, but if you're experienced, then you can understand in the first 30 seconds that you meet someone how deeply they are influenced by Maya. You would have to study the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita to know how to do this. But it's possible. In 30 seconds you can figure out how much that person is affected by Maya. And then once you diagnose the degree of the disease, then you can figure out what level of medicine to give them. Right?
Like Puja Mataji and Krishna Prasthana Mataji, am I right?
Well, they're experts at meeting people and preaching
Yeah.
to them.
Even Yamuna also. They're very clever.
Yeah, Yamuna.
But
Still
I know
learning.
she's a kid.
But I think probably we are shielded because we have the key.
Pooja almost got her head cut off.
I know.
Yeah.
The way
Krishna Vasta is pretty good though. She,
Yeah. I see.
Pooja
that.
once almost got her head cut off. There was this one girl in France, she was initiated devotee, we were on Sankirtan. And in France there are a lot of Arabs, Muslims. Even many years ago, there was plenty of Muslims. So we were in the Latin Quarter doing Sankirtan, and I noticed there was a big crowd around this brahmachari, and I looked again, and most of them were Arabs, so I got worried. So I walked over, I was trying to, get a little close to her, hear what she was saying. She was telling them, oh, and Krishna's family, the Yadus, were all Jewish. I got shocked with it, and I was looking at the Arabs were looking at her like, they're ready to take their knives out and stab her to death, So I came and went in there and I said, excuse me, you have to come with me. He said, why? I'm just getting started. I said, just keep quiet, don't say anything. I took her away, I mean, they killed her. She was so stupid. And what she was saying was not true also. It was a bunch of nonsense. Right? She was Jewish herself, and because the Yadu dynasty, the name Yadu sounds very similar to the word in Yiddish that Jews use for, they call each other Yid. So she thought, Yid, Yadu, same word. So, we're the descendants of the Yadus, right? You see how crazy some people are. But it could have gotten her killed, right? And the more she was talking like that, it could have gotten us killed also. Right? So I explained to her, I said, first of all, the Jews are not descendants of the Yadus. Just get that out of your mind. By the way, Prabhupada was asked that question, and he said, because the Yadus killed each other off. How can there be any descendants? Yeah. And then secondly, that's not the way you preach to Arabs, Muslims, especially fanatic Muslims, right? That's enough to get you killed. Even then, that was like 40 years ago, even then, it could be very dangerous. Yeah. Okay, so here, in the third chapter, okay, we were reading, did you finish that?
Yeah, that comes from.
Okay, so there's a very important point here. It says, ignorant men think of the body as the self. They accept bodily connections with others as kinsmanship. The land in which the body is obtained is their object of worship, and they consider the formalities of religious rituals to be ends in themselves. What does that mean? Formalities of religious principles to be ends in themselves.
So by following the rituals, they themselves think that is the final object of it.
Well,
Based of,
what's the final
purpose.
object of
the
a
following
ritual?
following rituals itself is the end in itself.
Yeah, they think they've done all their duties, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like religious rituals, that's the goal of life. Like if they do, like let's say this puja or that puja.
Well, I'll give you an
that's the
example.
ritual.
There was a village in India in which some idiot threw a rat into a well, and there was only one well in the village. So all the elders came around and said, what are we going to do? And the Brahmins came and said, wait a minute, we have mantras for this. So for 1 week they chanted mantras, right? And after 1 week, the Brahmin said, everything's all right now. So one elder man came, I said, and he looked at the Brahmin and said, okay, you said your mantras. Now who's going to go down into the well and take the rat out? Right? So, you see, the ritual, it's not a bad thing to perform rituals. It's not a bad thing. But they're not ends in themselves. What is the purpose of any Vedic ritual? That's the thing you should ask. What is the purpose of any Vedic ritual? Well, every Vedic ritual begins with Om. All the mantras, when you perform traditional and authentic Vedic rituals, they all begin with Om. Om Purnam Ada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate, right? Or Om Tat Vishnu Paramam Padam Sadapasyanti Surayo Diviva Chaksuratatam Tat Vipasno Vipanyuvo. Right? These are all Vedic mantras. They all start with Om. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you look in the 17th chapter, verse number 23, and 24 and 25. So verse number 17 chapter verse 23. Om Tat Sad Iti Nidesho Brahmanas Trivida Smrita Brahmanas Tena Vedascha Yagyascha Vihita Pura. From the beginning of creation, the three words Om Tat Sat were used to indicate the Supreme Absolute Truth. These three symbolic representations were used by Brahmanas while chanting the hymns of the Vedas and during the sacrifices for the satisfaction of the Supreme. Purport. It has been explained that penance, charity, sacrifice, charity, and foods are divided into three categories: the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. But whether first class, second class, or third class, they are all contaminated by the material modes of nature. When they are aimed at the Supreme, Om Tat Sat, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Eternal, they become means for spiritual elevation. In the scriptural injunctions, such an objective is indicated. These three words, Om Tat Sat, particularly indicate the Absolute Truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Vedic hymns, the word Om is always found. So Om refers to Krishna, the Supreme Absolute Truth. It doesn't say, it says Supreme Personality of Godhead, but it doesn't just say God, because actually there are many gods. Indra is a god, Chandra is a god, Varuna is a god, Mata is a god, Shiva is a god. They're all gods, right? But the Supreme Personality of Godhead is only one. Om, as it says, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. So Lord Brahma says, Ishvara Parama Krishna. And Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Satchit Ananda Vigraha, his body is made of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, not made of bones, marrow, blood, stool, urine, whatever. And Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karana. He is the cause of all causes. Anadi, he's never born. Adir, he's original. And his name is Govinda. Right? So, Lord Brahma should know better than anyone, because he's the first created living being in the material world. And he's the secondary creator. Krishna is the first creator, he's the secondary creator. And he knows who Krishna is better than anybody. And he's the founder of our sampradaya, Brahma, Madhva, Gaudiya, Vaishnava Sampradaya. So we accept him as the top expert. And he says, Ishvara Paramakrishna. So there's a difference between God and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or the Supreme Absolute Truth. So Om is the indirect way to address Krishna. And it means that all Vedic sacrifices are meant for pleasing Krishna. Even if it says in the Rig Veda, if you want this benefit, you should worship Indra. If you want that benefit, you should worship Chandra. If you want this other benefit, you should worship Mata. But when you come to the Samaveda, where mantras are given for these worships, the different types of worship of different demigods, they all begin with Om. And Om means Krishna. So it says, one who acts without following the regulations of the scriptures will not attain the absolute truth. He will get some temporary result, but not the ultimate end of life. The conclusion is that performance of charity, penance, charity, sacrifice, and penance must be done in the mode of goodness. Performed in the mode of passion or ignorance, they are certainly inferior in quality. The three words, Om Tat Sat, are uttered in conjunction with the holy name of the Supreme Lord, that is, Om Tat Vishnu. Om Tat Vishnu. So he's quoting the verse that I quoted. Om Tat Vishnu Paramam Padam Sadapasyanti Surayo. It's from the Rig Veda. And it says that all the demigods, whenever they are doing any sacrifice, they direct, their goal is Paramam Padam, the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu, or Krishna. And they are always surrendered at the feet of the Lord. Right? So they might, to have, let's say, a certain material benefit, the Vedas might say, worship Indra. But Indra is simply the servant of Vishnu or Krishna. Right? So ultimately, Vishnu or Krishna is the beneficiary of the sacrifice, not Indra. Indra can only give you what the Lord gives him. And therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, 5th chapter, 29th verse, it says, Bhoktaram yagatapasam sarvalokam maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam yadhyatva santim richati. Krishna is Bhoktaram, the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices. And he is Maheshwaram, the ultimate proprietor or owner of everything in the universe. And he's Suridam, the ultimate best friend of the living entity. Okay, so here it says, whenever a Vedic hymn or the holy name of the Supreme Lord is uttered, Om is added. This is the indication of Vedic literature. These three words are taken from Vedic hymns. Om iti etad brahmano nedishtam nama, Rig Veda, indicates the first goal. Then Tatvamasi, Chandogya Upanishad 6.8.7, indicates the second goal. And Sad Eva Somya, Chandogya Upanishad 6.2.1, indicates the third goal. Combined, they become Om Tat Sat. Formerly, when Brahma, the first created living entity, performed sacrifices, he indicated that these three words, he indicated by these three words the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the same principle has always been followed by disciplic succession. So this hymn has great significance. Bhagavad Gita recommends, therefore, that any work done should be done for Om Tat Sat or for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When one performs penance, charity, and sacrifice with these three words, he is acting in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is a scientific execution of the transcendental activities which enables one to return home back to Godhead. There is no loss of energy in acting in such a transcendental way. So now the question is, what are these three goals that they're talking about? The three goals, it says, Om iti etad brahmano nedistam nama, and tatvamasi, and then Sad eva somya. And actually combined they become Om Tat Sat. So you're our Sanskrit expert, Prabhu.
No, Prabhu, I don't know. I don't know Sanskrit. I can read in Telugu.
Okay. Actually, the next verse explains it. Therefore, transcendentalists undertaking performances of sacrifice, charity, and penance in accordance with scriptural regulations begin always with Om to attain the Supreme. Om Tat Vishnu Paramam Padam, again, same verse, Rig Veda 122.20. The lotus feet of Lord Vishnu are the supreme devotional platform. The performance of everything on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead assures the perfection of all austerities. So that's the meaning of Om Tat Sat. Everything is meant for the pleasure of Lord Vishnu or Krishna. And the goal of sacrifice, charity, and penance. Sacrifice, charity, and penance, right? Because in the next chapter you'll see, 18th chapter, verse number 5, it says, Yagya dana tapa karma, natyajyam karyam evatat, yagyo danam tapaschaiva, pavanani manishinam. Acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be given up. They must be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance purify even the great soul. So, therefore, the first goal, second goal, third goal, talking about sacrifice, charity, and penance. And the goal of performing those ritualistic activities is to please Krishna. That's what Om Tat Sat means. And that's why every mantra begins with Om, and every mantra ends with Om Tat Sat. Om Agnenaya Supatarayas Tarayas Asmin. One second. Yeah. Om Agnenaya Supatarayas. Om Naya Agnenaya Supataraya Asmin Vishwani Deva Vayunani Vidvan Yodachma Shurana Mino Bhuyastam Te Nama Uttim Venama Om Tat Sat. So at the end of the mantra, one says Om Tat Sat. In other words, the accomplishment of all purposes of sacrifice, charity, and penance is to please the Lord, or Lord Vishnu, or Lord Krishna. So sacrifice means you deny the interest of the senses. You learn to do that by employing the senses in the service of the Lord. Sacrifice. Penance means you do something to make up or to purify previous sinful activities. And charity means you sacrifice your acquired wealth to glorify the Lord, right? So, but ultimately all of this is to bring one closer to God, to surrendering to God. Okay. So, we see that this question of duty was compromised in the minds of Duryodhana and Bhisma, Pitamaha, even though they're great devotees. And they knew it. And they knew that by not stopping Draupadi from being stripped, or not protesting, meant that the Kuru dynasty was destined to be destroyed. Because they committed such a heinous act of sinful act by trying to defile a chaste woman. Okay, so maybe we'll stop there. We only did one verse today. However, are there any questions?
Prabhu, you were telling about material desires, but again, material desires could be very relative, right?
Which kind of desires?
Material desires.
Material, okay.
It could be very relative, like what would be a desire for me could be a necessity for somebody else. So how would one distinguish that what is necessity and what is a desire?
What is a necessity? It's a good question. when in doubt, ask a spiritual, or ask a guru who's a bona fide guru, right? Now, in whenever you're determining what is the course of action to take, there are 5 factors that you have to take into consideration. One is the place. 2, the senses. 3, the action itself. 4, the